Join me in welcoming Steven Feinberg. Hey, Steven, how you doing today?
Great, Steve. How are you doing?
I'm doing really good.
Good to
Such a
see you.
great day right now. Yeah,
Good to see you
good to
again.
see you too. So, uh, the book is called Advantage Makers: How Exceptional Leaders Win by Creating Opportunities Others Don't. And we want to talk about that one. But before we do that, just to give us a general idea, tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do in the world.
Who I am? Well, it began in the beginning, and I was a shoe shine boy on the streets of New York as a little kid when I was 5 years old. Then I became a paper boy. I was a New York City doorman. I actually was a carnival barker at one point, which taught me exactly what not to do and how not to treat human beings. Right, so it was a big lesson, well received and appreciated. I was also a New York City cab driver when I was going to college, and
Probably another thing that taught you what not to do if you want people like you.
Every cab driver has a philosophy. That's what I've realized. Every time you get in a cab, they all have philosophies. And it takes 30 seconds and they'll tell you philosophy. It's like you say, let's keep moving here. Like, can we get around this track? And then the cabbie will say, there's nothing to rush to. You'll eventually get there. That's always there for, whatever it is. And then you get the opposite philosophy from the next cab driver you get into. It's really interesting. But then I became a drug counselor and I ran a suicide prevention center for quite a while. And then we owned the family pizzeria in New York City as well. So it's a pretty wide scope. And then eventually I became a trainer and executive coach. I'm a neurostrategist and working with clients from Google, Apple, LinkedIn, Visa, Wells Fargo. And I taught 30 years at the University of San Francisco in a multidisciplinary courses in psychology, business, and communications and leadership.
So, neuro training, what does that involve?
Neurostrategy, right?
Yeah.
So think about it as brains and games, right? So neuro is brain, the neural circuits of the brain, how they operate, and what are the patterns what triggers them, what enables them, what disrupts them, how do you design them, how do you add more skill sets? So the neuroscience based, it's the application. I'm not a neuroscientist, it's the application of it, and strategies about the thinking that goes in the game part. So it's brains, games, and foes. How do you deal with difficulties, obstacles, etc.?
So are you
I work with leaders in there to help them transform the game that they're.
So is part of what you teach things like game theory, or do you have one of your own that is differing from what game theory is?
It's different, but game theory is, it's brilliant and I understand it, but it's really, there are other, I understand that there are a certain set of rules that who gets to say what to whom when is an underlying rule that people often don't realize. And it has really substantial consequences, hidden rules that have substantial consequences on our behavior and the outcomes that we have and the decisions that we make.
It's really tough. It would be like, and life seems to be this way actually, like playing a game where you don't really know, somebody just hands you a Monopoly board and some pieces and says, okay, play this game, but you don't know what it is. That's kind of life.
Yeah, it's always the context, right? We walk into a context, it's the playing field, right? And your life is like that Monopoly board, only it's a different set of rules. And each situation, every context you come into has a different set of rules. And some of them are patterns and they're familiar and some of them are different, right? And so it's the most highly skilled people, the advantage makers, are capable of reading the rule book, the hidden rule book really fast to navigate it.
So you said you have like the first page from your book or something that kind of helps explain that to us. You want to go ahead and read that to us?
Sure. Let me just grab it. So This is not a bedtime story, so keep your eyes awake. Yeah. If you're driving, don't just keep your eyes open. So this is the first page of my book, The Advantage Makers. Hundreds of years ago in medieval Austria, a small but determined army was trying desperately to hold off onto its fortress against tremendous odds. For more than 6 months, the defenders had been surrounded by a hostile army. With no way to contact the outside and help replenish their stocks, supplies had dwindled to a desperate level. Only 1 cow and 2 bags of grain were left. The fortress soldiers, racked with fatigue and hunger, turned to the commander for guidance, expecting their leader to say the expected ration of food for as long as we can to hold out. They were astonished and perturbed as well when they received a different, radical reply. Kill the cow, stuff it all with the grain that we have, and toss it over the walls when the next wave of attacks ensues. This seemed illogical, foolhardy, and dangerous. But during the next attack, they followed the unexpected order and heaved the grain of a stuffed cow over the wall. Without a doubt, they anticipated a slow, anguished death by starvation. But the commander had foreseen something that no one else had. Confused by this bovine assault, several of the attackers took the cow back to the officer's tent. The attacking officer saw it for what it was, a signal of defiance from the fortress commander, as well as a message that his soldiers had the will to fight on. If they could afford to throw a cow stuffed with excess grain over the wall, he reasoned, they must have this vast stores of supplies, enough for the entire winter. He ordered an immediate retreat. So it's an amazing situation. By the way, I have a business card. I went to the fortress, the actual fortress that was there. It was Castle Hochholzstewitz outside in Austria. And I wanted to see the place that this actually occurred, and it was a true story, right? And so how does this relate? You might ask, well, how does this medieval cow tossing relate to business and leadership and everyday activities? Well, the commander engaged in strategic shifting, the thinking that an advantage maker does. They are able to shift the situation. So he shifted, for example, he saw the food as, instead of it being something to just eat and digest and keep them alive, he used it as to send a message to the other attackers, right? He shifted the amount of time. They thought they only had like days left. And by sending this message, he said, we have a long period of time in which we have to deal with, right? So he was shifting the game. And, you know, like people say, well, maybe he just got lucky, right? And this was not luck. This was a very well thought out, desperate, no doubt, but thought out, look, if we don't do this, talking about gaming, so if we game out the situation, we only have an extra couple of days. I have to do something now. What can I do? How can I take this unexpected, you know, to shift my thinking to something that will work and transform things, right? And so this is, whenever you're up against the odds, this strategic shifting is something that you can do when you learn the skill sets that advance the lens that they have.
It's interesting to me. I watch way too much TV and movies, but it always amazes me when you see a battle scene, how seldom there's any tacticians involved in any of the battle scenes. It's like, that was so strategically stupid. Why did you do that? I mean, I understand that it makes the TV show have to have another show now, you know, another episode now, but that was just dumb.
Right. It does. And it's like, what's the reason for this silliness? And yet we all do these things, right? We all don't, you know, but if you go meta, if you step back and look at the situation, you can begin to see the context that you're in and how it's going to play out. And that's what the commander did. And that's what we all can do. You can get to what I call, you can get to the 8th floor, right? So I was at Sun Microsystems many years ago, and I was talking to a manager I was consulting with, coaching him, and he said to me, well, everyone like he was discussing some issue with his boss, and he said, well, he has his opinion, I have my opinion, and it's just the way it is. Everyone has their opinions. I said, yeah, but who has the vantage point? And he went, well, what do you mean vantage point? I said, and we walked, it was about 5 p.m. We walked over to we were on the 8th floor. We walked over to the window. I said, come here, look. We looked out at the traffic, like this rush hour traffic, so-called rush hours, slowed to a standstill. And I said, look at that one blue car and watch the way he's driving. I watched him, I noticed him, and he was zooming in and out, and he got off the freeway and he went around. And I went, God, that guy's really trying to figure this obstacle out, trying to get, someplace. And as we stood there and watched, I noticed that he made a right turn into the towards a direction that there was going to be a construction zone, another two or three blocks up that he couldn't get beyond, and he'd have to double back. And I said, if we could have communicated to him, we could have told him there's a construction zone ahead. From our vantage point, we actually know what's actually going to happen. We can actually see it. It's not an opinion. We can see it. I said, everybody, in every situation, there is someone, not necessarily the leader, not necessarily the person with power, but someone has the vantage point to see the reality. And so what we're talking about is seeing reality in a way that can transform the decisions, the instant decisions, to be able to create the outcomes, better outcomes for yourself, better experiences that you might want. So it's like getting to that 8th floor, be able to see what's really going on. When who has it? You may not have it. Maybe the answer lies with somebody else has answers. Sometimes you do have it, right? And so it's being able to be flexible, adaptable in your thinking. That's another thing that advantage makers do.
How does a person determine between I've got that vantage and I need to go to somebody else because I don't see it?
Right. This is like, how do I know that I just have my own opinions, right? Well,
right.
Most of us just have our own opinions. Right. But some of us, like really, there are, like we just had some tree guys out here. We have some beautiful trees out here. We just moved to this lovely place in Oregon, and we have these beautiful trees, and there's a little browning. And I said, I know nothing about this. This is above my pay grade. This guy came in and he started explaining to me what was going on up there and what we should do. And it was clear that he knew. He had a much better understanding he had an expertise, a knowledge base that was true, that was accurate. And so part of it is going to be able to, and if you think about an interaction different than a tree, where you have specific skill set, but in the interaction, you can look at, well, how's that working for you? One of the questions I always ask people is, like leaders will come in and I had one client who was getting in trouble with the CEO. And I said to him, basically, and he kept on blaming the other, the CEO for various reasons. And it wasn't that it wasn't accurate, but I said, how's that working for you? Your communication, the way you're interacting, right? And how's it working for you? The answer was it wasn't. And so that's a useful question to ask. How's that working for you, right? Another thing you can do is ask, do you see it differently? Here's my point of view, right? So as best I can, I can see this part of it. I can see as much of this situation, this difficulty, as best I can. Here's my view. Am I missing anything? Do you see it differently? So be willing to challenge your own thinking with the other person. Instead of it being a contest of who's got, who knows exactly what's right. It's like you can actually engage in a game-changing, what I call game-changing conversation. Some routines, these are routines, language routines that can increase the likelihood of you moving things forward and more accurately. A lot of times people, they're sincere about being upset about a situation. Like my mother yelled at me, she doesn't love me. And if you go, well, what actually happened? Well, I was at the street and she just yelled at me. I said, what was happening at the street? Well, my ball went into the street and I started running out to the ball. I said, and my mother just yelled at me. Well, why did did you see? I said, oh, and then the car stopped. So your mother yelled at you because she could see that there was a car and she was actually saving your life. You went, oh, okay. Yes. Right. And so people have this reactive sincerity. They're sincerely, and they feel these feelings, but it isn't actually necessarily an accurate representation of what's happened or what's happening or what will happen. Right. And so it's being able to go through some of these kind of situations.
So, of course, the big question is, can everyone be an advantage maker, or is it a skill set that some people just, shouldn't even bother because they just can't?
Well, I spend my life writing this, doing these things because I believe everyone can do it, right? and I think I have a vantage point on that. I think the answer is yes. And so let me give you an example of advantage makers that's commonplace. So someone walks up to an airline ticket counter, and one person, the airline ticket counter, says, we can't do anything for you. And that person accepts that and walks away, like they wanted their seat changed. Another person gets into a fight, right? And the third person, the advantage maker, they pleasantly start to interact with the ticket agent, and they have a conversation with them. And the ticket agent goes, wait a second, let me just check something for you, right? And then you have a conversation and the doors open up that couldn't. That third person is the advantage maker. Same thing in a negotiation. You're in a negotiation, someone says, here's what the terms are, here's what we can do. And one person, accepts it just as the way the person said. The second person starts, they just walk away. They go, I can't do that. And they just walk away. First person accepts it, second person walks away, and the third person engages in a conversation to find a better way. Let's find up, I see what you're after. This is what matters to you. This is the criteria you have. Here's the time frame. Here's how I could do this a little better. Maybe you could give. And now you have a much better negotiation. That's an advantage maker. Same thing on a team. A person, one person, something is going on, people are getting upset, and one person gets frustrated, the other person just pushes back, and the third person says, am I doing something that's making this more difficult for us to make this work together, right? The third person is advantage maker. So this is all, you can actually start seeing that in certain language patterns, you can actually hear the advantage makers. And that's how I got into it. I noticed, it's like, why did I do this? I noticed there's some people just continuously got better advantages out of situations. And it had nothing to do with their education, had nothing to do with their socioeconomic condition, had nothing to do with their gender. It was males and females. Had nothing to do with how hard they worked, right? But it was the patterns that they were engaged in. And so what the book does, the Advantage Makers, is shows you the patterns that where you get stuck, where you can do things differently.
So everybody really does need to get the book, especially since it is something for everyone. The book is called Advantage Makers: How Exceptional Leaders Win by Creating Opportunities Others Don't. And I'm going to put the link in right now so you can get it. If you didn't read it in the description, and there it is in the comments for you as well. Steven, I'm so looking forward to reading the book and seeing all the people that get it. Give us one tip for somebody who has never, somebody who's always either been that explosive, angry with the ticket counter person or walk away person. What could they do just to begin to embrace the concept of having a conversation?
Well, keep your eye on the prize. Right? It's like, what do you want to have happen? And they'll go and look at what you're doing and ask yourself, is that getting you what you want? Kind of like what I said earlier. Is that working for you? No. So who else could be doing how would someone else do it who may be able to make it? It actually go, and if someone's not around, you go, if I'm pushing, why don't I do something that's 180 degrees the opposite? Instead of pushing, maybe I should be asking, right? Instead of walking away, maybe I should be requesting help. Right? So look at a simple idea is a 180-degree solution to whatever you're doing. So if every time you say something, the other person fights back, it's escalating up. Maybe what you can do is be the first person to de-escalate, right? And take a breath. Breathing happens to be a really important value from the brain's point of view of accessing, beginning to put yourself back in what's called vagal control. That is the vagus nerve allows you to either be in a sympathetic or parasympathetic orientation, and you want to calm yourself. Your breathing puts you in parasympathetic tendencies. So take a breath, walk away, to breathe, and then go, what's a 180 degrees? What's one small thing that I can do differently?
I love that. Well, everybody do run and get Advantage Makers from Amazon. You can actually get it today for free. Steven, thanks so much for being with us on the show here today.
I enjoyed it. And hello to everyone, and go create a few advantages in your life. Shift the odds in your favor.